Hello. The Divine Code reading for September 4th, pages 177 and 178. We're in the chapter, The Service of Molech. Topic number 2. In one of the Molech rituals, a father would give one of his children to the idol. See Malbin on Leviticus 25 in the exclamations of the Sifrei, to stray after Moloch. And anyone who does so is liable for a capital sin. So this chapter is going to be looking very closely at one, not necessarily all of them, because there's understandings that there's other rituals for Moloch, the idol Moloch. It's going to look specifically at one of them, and the purpose of looking at this is to teach us principles of how to understand other idol worship. Typically, we're not supposed to really be looking at the idol worship because Moloch is discussed in the Bible, and because Moloch is an ancient religion that people today don't follow the specific religion of Moloch that existed in the Bible. Therefore, we can use it as a academic discussion, as an academic study. It's a safe area to study because it no longer exists and because it was discussed in the Bible. And then we use the principles we learned from that when we study other forms of idolatry. We use this as our study tool, our learning experience. How was this ritual performed? A person would kindle a great fire before the idol. Pirush HaMishnah Sanhedrin chapter 7, Sefer HaMitzvahs Negative Commandment 7, and Sefer Kinuk on that. Commandment 208. And then the father would take one, or even some, but not all, of his children, and give the child to the idol's priests who were tending and serving the fire. These priests would then return the child to the father after he had already given the child into their possession, in order to pass the child through the fire as the will of the father. The father of the child passed his child through the fire with the permission of the priest, while walking on his feet in the midst of the flames. The exact ritual is not simply understood from the source, Sanhedrin 64b. Rambam seems to say that they would burn great fires on both sides, with a shallow fire in the middle connecting the two great fires. The father would then walk or run his child through the middle, the child walking on the ground together with the father. And this is the exclamation of the Keshnef Mishnah, and also Rashi's exclamation on Sanhedrin. The child would be approximately 3 or 4 years old, even though one is liable for passing children at any age. So there's many variables involved in this. And each variable is part of the service. It's necessary in understanding the ritual of a service is that the service has a variety of variables, a variety of steps, parts to it. And all the parts have to be working together in order for the service to be done correctly. And therefore, what they're doing here is they're going through they're showing the multiple steps, the multiple parts involved in this ritual that's necessary to be considered performing the ritual. The father walked his child along through the fire from one side to the other. Thus, the father did not cremate his child to Molech in the manner that children were cremated in the worship of some other idols. Rather, this form of worship called Molech involved merely passing the child through the fire. Rambam, The Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, 6:3. It is clear from his words here and from the laws of the foundations of Torah 5:4 and other sources cited above that the service of passing some of one's children through a fire for Moloch is the form of idol worship. It is therefore clear that Gentiles are liable for this, as they are for any other form of idol worship. Ramban, in his sermons, writes, on page 150, Gentiles were not strictly forbidden to perform magic and the like, which is mentioned in the Torah section of Softim in Deuteronomy. Only in regard to one who passes some of his children through the fire in the service of Moloch, which is a type of idol worship. They were commanded that it is forbidden. It is also clear from Sefer HaChinuch that Gentiles are warned in the Torah about Moloch. It is also clear from Sanhedrin 57a, the prohibition for all types of idol worship are the same for Gentiles as for Jews. From the verse, any man who shall give his progeny to Moloch shall be put to death. Leviticus 22, see Rashi on Sanhedrin. So the specific laws of idol worship that apply to a non-Jew are the same as the specific laws of idol worship that apply to a Jew in regard to items that are capital offense. In other areas, if it's idol worship, then it's forbidden. If it's magic, it might be allowed as sort of the use of the natural world. However, if the use of the natural world is used in the service of an idol, then the use of the natural world is forbidden as a service to that idol, if it's being done in a service of the idol. The ritual involved is passing the child through the flames. It's a dedication ceremony. It involves the priest allowing it, the father giving him over, walking through, and then returning with the child who's now been dedicated to the service of the idol. All these steps involved, it could be seen as magic if there wasn't an idol involved. But because there's an idol involved, then it's idol worship. And this is an area that is specifically mentioned concerning non-Jews in the Bible. It's clear. Speaking of non-Jews not being allowed to do this, and therefore it becomes the textbook case, which is what's being used for here, as to how to understand these things. Topic number 3. The service this service was the established ritual of Moloch. Therefore, if one performs this service to an idol other than Moloch, he is not liable to capital punishment by an earthly court. Rambam, The Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, 6:3. As explained in chapter 3 above, the Gentile who worships an idol is not liable to court unless he does so according to the customary ritual of that idol, Kriyat Sefer, or unless he serves it with the 4 special services that are reserved for God alone. So there's an understanding that this ritual was a service of idol worship specific to Moloch. There was something unique about Moloch and something unique about this service, that the two went together. And therefore, if someone did this in front of another idol, now, I mean, supposedly, the priest of idol worship could come up and say, well, we're going to do this for some other idol. I'm not sure if that would mean that idol becomes named Moloch. I'm not sure, but what it's saying here is part of the textbook case is that if a person does a service that's done for another idol, for one idol, in front of another idol, that's not their service, the service of the other idol. He's doing a service that he learned in some other town in front of another idol, but he's doing it for this new idol, but it's not the idol service, then it's not considered idol worship. In order to be considered idol worship, it has to be the specific ritual for that idol. That's what's being said. Topic number 4. A father is not liable to punishment by an earthly court unless he gives over one of his children to Moloch, passing the child through the fire by walking through the fire with the child on foot. If the father gave the child over to the hands of the priest so that the priest should do the ritual, but the father did not pass the child through the flame, or if the father passed the child through the flames but did not hand him over to the first to the priest, or if he gave the child to the priest and passed him through the flames, but he did not pass the child through the flames on foot. For example, he carried the child on his shoulders or in his hands or the like. This is discussed in Kesef Mishnah. It's also clear from Rashi's exclamation on Tractate Sanhedrin 64b. He is not liable. He is not held liable for punishment in an earthly court until he gave over some of his children and left some of his children behind. As it says, Leviticus 23, for he gave of his children to Moloch, that is, some of his children, but not all of his children. And that's also explained in Rambam, the laws of the worship of stars and idols, 6:3. So the person does something that's similar to the worship of the idol, but it's not according to the specific steps, the specific elements of the idol worship. He's doing kind of a freelance thing. It's the question of whether, which are the specific elements for that idol worship, and every idol is going to have a different set of instructions. Therefore, an idol might have certain things that are very necessary, very specific. Might have other things that people kind of add to it, and change. Those things could be changed. The important thing is to know what are the specific parts of the idol worship. What are the necessary parts to be considered part of the idol worship? So by listing the necessary parts, we know that if someone does something besides the necessary parts, then they haven't actually done the service to the idol. One who gave over all his children at once is not liable in court if, for example, he gave over an only child or all of his children together. Tosafot on Tractate Sanhedrin 64b. Since it is the traditional way of serving, was with some of one's children. Beit Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Birav on Rambam there. See Guide to the Perplexed, Volume 3, Chapter 37, page 360, for the reason why the ritual was done with only part of one's progeny. See Sefer Chinuch, Commandment 208, and Rabbeinu Bakai, Leviticus 22. If he passed them one by one, when he passed the first one, he was liable. And he was liable for each one except for the last one. So if he does a service with one child, but he leaves the other children behind, and then he's liable for that because he left the children behind. And then he does a service for the next child and the next child. The intermediate children would also be considered liability because he's leaving someone behind. The last child is passed through. He would not be liable for that because he didn't leave any children behind at that point. So the last child he would not be liable for, but every child before that he would be. Because the last child, he would no longer be performing the service. However, that doesn't negate the earlier ones. That's why it says if he passes them through one at a time. If he passed the whole group together at one time, then he would not be liable because he didn't leave anyone behind. Tosafot, see Kesef Mishnah, from which it appears that even in such a case, one is exempt. So it's a possibility. I guess if it's all being done on the same day, if it's all being done as, they all show up as a family, there might be a question as to whether or not, if they show up as a family, does that mean that each one is part of one large activity? Then he may not be liable for any of it. So that would be something that a court would have to sort out. And a lot of times when there's cases of if there's a case of uncertainty, they would not be they would not execute a person if there's an uncertainty about it. But it's necessary to understand the specifics of the rituals and to know whether or not the person actually did the specifics of the rituals or not. Thank you.